Welcome to AP Computer Science B term, second semester. We're going to look at today assignment 2.00. First assignment we're going to look at is exercise 6.7. Write an application program to ask the user for the ages of 3 people, then print the age of the youngest. The first thing I notice when I go to compile my listings for chapter 6 is that I have 2 programs that don't compile. It says to compile this, compile first the Q class and chapter 7 listings. So I need to go into chapter 7 listings and get the Q class. So I do that. So I go back into my listings. I go into chapter 7 and I find my Q class. So I copy it. Then I go back to where I was before. And I paste it. Open up BlueJ again. Now I have to compile this first. And I go compile everything else. And I'm still getting an error. Growth rates extends object. So when we try and compile the growth rates tester, it tells us in comments that growth rates is public and should be declared in a file called growthrates.java. It's because you have the public here. Well, let's look at what the chapter says. Okay, so reading in the chapter, it tells us that the file name must be growth rates Java, since growth rates is a public class in the file. So our file automatically called this growth rates tester, so we need to go back and change it to be just growth rates, okay? So let's go back and do that. So I close this out, and I got to rename this growth rates instead of growth rates tester. Let me come down here. So I'll go back in here where it says tester. And I'll change this to growth rates Java. Take out the word tester. Okay, so I'm going to reset. It's going to click back in here. I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to reopen the BlueJ package. So now I click this and compile it. Now everything is all set and ready to go. Now we're going to build us a file. We're going to open a new class in BlueJ and call it exercise 6.6_7. So obviously we're going to input Java swing J option pane. And we're going to call it at public class exercise 6.7 with an opening curly brace. Then we're going to put our main argument, public static void main strings args, like usual, with the opening curly brace. So now we need to get the user's input. So now we're going to declare a variable called input, and we're going to make it a string class. So now we got to get the first input from the user. So we're going to have him put in the first age, and we're going to call it input. So now we're going to have to parse it out. So if there's nothing put in there, of course, we've got to exit the system. So we're testing for a fail first off. Otherwise, if it pops out of the if, we're going to declare that input as A. And we're going to parse it. We're going to parse it as a double. Okay, we're going to see we're taking the input the user gave us and we're making it variable A. Next thing we do is we get the second input. So once again, we're using the same variable input, but this time we're using it for the second age. Now we're going to put it in a variable. Once again, we test for fail. If they don't put anything, we say bye. They're playing, right? Otherwise, you're going to declare the second variable as B, and you're going to parse that string that they put into the dialog box. They always never what you put in there, numbers, whatever. It's always a string. So once again we declare input to be what they put in for the third age. So once again, there's your fail. You can copy and paste this stuff. Say goodbye if they don't put anything in for the third age. Otherwise, you give that value C. Okay? You declare it, you parse it out to be C. So now you got three variables, age A, age B, and age C. Now we've got to find the lowest value, right? Okay, first we're going to declare automatically A as the minimum, as the lowest age. We're going to replace it if B is smaller. So we look at it. So if A is bigger than B, then the smallest age is B. And we do the same thing with C. So if whatever's minimum and C is smaller than that, then we declare the minimum to be C. So there we have all the possibilities. The minimum age could be A, B, or C. That's all it is to it. Then we return to the user. The youngest is, and we put in the whatever's the smallest amount. Then we exit the program. And you have a couple closing curly braces. Exercise 6.8. Write an application program to ask the user for the amount paid for purchase and also for the amount of money offered in payment. Print out the number of pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters that the user receives in change. The change should produce the least possible number of coins, but print can't do that if the change is not in the range 0 through 99 cents. Hint, quarters equals offered minus paid divided by 25. That should give you a hint on how to do the exercise, how to program it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new class in BlueJ called Exercise 6.8. Now the next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to import the Java Swing package, J-option pane. Then we go public class exercise 6.6_8, the same as what we called it. And we begin our opening curly brace. There's nothing new with our main statement here. Public static void main string args with the opening curly brace, just like before. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to instantiate a variable. And we're going to call it whatever the user wants to put in for the amount paid for purchase. Okay. So say, for example, 50 cents. That's what's paid for the purchase. That's going to be what we're going to declare as in, IN. And it's going to be a string variable. That's because anything that the user puts in there is going to be a string. I have to parse it. It's going to be a double because it's going to be a fraction, right? So we're going to go double, parse double, what? What are we parsing? What we declared up here, the int, whatever the user put in there, we're going to multiply it by 100. So you put 0.50 for 50 cents. So it's going to become 100 because you're going to multiply it by 100. This becomes significant because you're going to have to divide the number. So you have how many quarters, how many nickels, how many dimes, correct? So we're declaring a variable, whatever amount this is that they paid for the purchase is now going into a variable called double paid. And you're parsing whatever they put into there as paid. Now we're going to use this IN variable for the amount offered in payment. Since this is already changed to paid, we can still use in, okay? So same as before, double offered this time. Doubled offered is now what we're going to parse and multiply by 100. So we've got two variables here, one paid and one offered, okay? So we've just taken whatever they put in the dialog boxes and we transferred it to the variables we need for this lesson. So now we're going to create a new variable called changed. And what the change is going to be is offered minus paid. So what's the amount paid for the purchase minus the offered in payment? So the offered is obviously going to be more than the paid, or maybe equal. Now we have our three variables, paid, offered, and change. So what do we need to handle first before we can separate out not dimes, nickels, and quarters? We want to determine if somebody's entered something that's out of bounds. Did they not pay enough? That would be less than 0. Is it more than $1? That would be more than 100. So those are out of bounds conditions, and we're going to handle that next. So here, if your change is greater than 100 or less than 0, open a curly brace, what are you going to do? What you're going to do is you're going to return some type of message to the dialog box. Then you're going to send them a message, can't do that. Then you're going to jump out of the program because to do anything further would be to cause it to crash. However, if it jumps out and doesn't meet this if condition, you can go ahead and run the program. So the first thing we do is we separate out the quarters. So we have to declare what quarters is, right? So we declare int quarters is equal to int change divided by 25. So in our example, if we had 50 cents and we divided it by 25, we'd have 2. So the number of quarters would be what? 2, right? And since it's an integer, it doesn't return any fractions. So if you have 52, it throws away the 2, right? Because 2 divides equally into 50, and it doesn't handle any remainder. So that's going to be nice and neat. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take away all the quarters from the equation. So change is equal to change subtracting out the quarter. So if I had 52 cents and you took out 50 cents, so that would be change is equal to 50 cents minus 50. See? So next we need to divide out the dimes. So what's the remainder? The remainder is change, right? So now you divide out the dimes. So you divide whatever amount is left, say 35, divide out by 10. So you get 3 dimes, right? And it throws away the 5 cents. Now you've taken out change is equal to change minus the dime. So you're getting down to less than a dime now, right? So your change is now 5 cents if you took out the 5 out of 35. Now you take out the nickels. So I have 7 cents, right? So I divide 7 by 5, I get 1 with 2 cents left over. So it throws away the 2 cents and it tells me I have 1 nickel. So change is equal to change minus the nickel. So now whatever you got is probably less than 5 cents. So now once you separate out the nickels, anything left over is going to be pennies. So what do? You're going to say, you're going to send a message to the guy, whoever put the user, say, you have the following change. So you have number of quarters plus quarters, so that comes down 1, see? Then you have plus number of dimes plus dimes, number of nickels plus nickels, and number of pennies is whatever the change is left over. And once you're done, you're done. You exit the system, and have a couple closing curly braces. Then when you do is you compile the program, and you're going to be great. No syntax errors. Exercise 6.13. Replace the logic in ask int so that it accepts a double value and rounds it down before returning it. Hint: use int, but notice that int applied to a negative non-integer rounds up. You need an input of 3.8 returned as 3. So you would need an input of minus 3.8 or minus 3.2 returned as minus 4. Okay, exercise 613, we're supposed to find the askInt class. If you search your chapter 6 for it, you'll find it in the class IO. So what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to round down the answer. If you round up the answer when it's negative, that's a problem, so that's what you've got to fix. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out the given return statement. So we put in string S anything the user has put into the input dialog box. Now we declare a double, and we're going to parse that string out and put it into a double named num. So if the number is greater than 0, we're going to round up normally. We're going to return the integer of num. So it's declared as a double. What it does is it ignores the fraction part of the number. Okay, so it's going to return the lowest number if you just declare it as an integer. So you just cast a double as an integer, which is acceptable, chops off the remainder. So otherwise, if that's not the case, what do you do if it's less than 0? Now you declare a temporary variable, and what you do is you take the integer of that numbers. In other words, it's going to round up, say it's minus 3.75. The integer of that is 3, and you take away from that 75. So what does that do? It rounds it down to the next lowest number. So that'll automatically chop off the end, but it's gone to the one below it. You want it rounded down, not rounded up. It just removes the remainder from the variable. That's how you would come down to your lower number. What happens if temp is greater than 0? Then you return integer minus 1. So in other words, it can happen where after subtracting out the number, it becomes higher than 0. So then you just subtract 1 from the number. Otherwise, you just return whatever the result was that you got. So that's how you do it, taking care of all the situations. And don't forget, 3 closing curly braces will end it. Then you'll be able to compile it. Exercise 6.21. Write an application program that reads 3 strings of characters from the keyboard, then prints the one that comes first as determined by compare to. So we make a new class, a Blue Jay, and call it exercise 621. Now this logic is very similar to what we did with exercise 6.7, the first exercise we did today, where we found the youngest. But now we're dealing with alphabetical order of strings. So we're using the compare to method that we just learned in the last section. So once again, we import Javix, string, swing, J option pane. Next, we declare a public class, exercise 621, like you would do. Next, we put in our main argument, public static void main strings args, like you would. So now you have the user enter the first string, and you're going to call that S1. So whatever the integer, you show a dialog box, right, that says first, so the user will enter whatever string. So now you initialize a second string and ask the user for a second string. Then, of course, you initialize string S3 for the third string. And then you ask the user through a dialog box for the third input. Now remember, just like we did greater than or less than with the numbers, actually that's what you're doing again. You're testing the strings. How are they alphabetically? And we're doing by the computer alphabet. Like I was talking about in class about the ASCII code. Whatever the code is for that particular letter, it's going to be, won't necessarily be alphabetical by our standards because capital letters are a completely different number set than lowercase. But at any rate, understanding that, this will work. So you take the first string and you compare it to the second string. So if the second string is lower than the first string, what do? If it's lower in the alphabet than the first string that you're looking at, that's what the 0 represents, the number of the representation of the number of the letter. So you're declaring first what? To be string 2. First becomes what? String 2. So now we compare string 3 to first. See, we declared string 1 first, but then if string 2 was smaller or earlier in the alphabet, string 2 became first. So whatever the first one is, you're comparing to string 3. And if string 3 is lower, then string 3 became first in the alphabet. Then you put out in the dialog box the first string is, the lowest string is, and you put in whatever came out to be your winner. And you just boot out of the system. That's all you do. And has a closing curly brace. That's the program.